Yes, we are continuing with the topic price elasticity, price theory, and we are looking at demand. We are now at a point of elasticity of demand. As you can see it on our blackboard or whiteboard, it can be blackboard or whiteboard, this time whiteboard. It is elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand. This is the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity to change in the factors which determine or influence demand. You see, it is the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a product to changes in the factors which determine or influence demand. So we look at the factors that we considered, factors that determine or that influence demand, and we see what happens if there are changes in those factors. What happens to the demand? How does it change? So you put the factor on one side and see its change. How does it affect the demand on the other side? So we say that the elasticity of demand measures the reactions of the buyers in case of any change or changes in the factors that determine demand. If the factors that determine demand have changed, how are the reactions? How are these buyers or consumers reacting? How are they reacting? So that reaction is what we call, or the extent of reaction is what we call the elasticity of demand. It shows that the demand is either elastic, the response is elastic, is moving, I can use the word widely, or it is inelastic, the movement, the change is small. So after looking at the response, the responsiveness of this of the change, how it has changed with the consumer, we determine, has it been elastic? Is the change so wide? How does it affect the demand of the commodity? So we are going to look at three major aspects. We shall look at three major aspects of elasticity of demand. We are going to consider the price elasticity of demand. That is number one. Then we are going to look at cross price elasticity of demand. Then we also look at the third one is going to be income elasticity of demand. Those are the areas that we are going to cover under this elasticity of demand. The price elasticity of demand, the cross price elasticity of demand, and then the income elasticity of demand. There could be other elasticities, but for purposes of this level of economics, we are going to look at basically those three areas. And now we can begin with the price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand. We begin with the price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand. As I said earlier, there are some abbreviations that we use in economics, but these abbreviations are basically used when we are writing our notes or when we are making our notes. But when it comes to exams, it is sometimes not required to write those abbreviations. We write them in full. So if you see DD on the whiteboard here, it represents demand, and if you see 2, it represents output. So we are looking at the price elasticity of demand. What is it by definition? It is the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity, of quantity demanded of a given commodity to changes in the price of that very commodity. It is the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a given commodity to the change in the price of that very commodity. In other words, what is the degree of change in the demand? You have got a commodity. What is the degree of change in the demand of that commodity as a result of change in its price? Remember that when we are looking at the law of demand, we said that it is the law says that the higher the price, the lower the demand. The lower the price, the higher the demand. Now we want to measure when you are changing the price from high to low, what will be the change in the quantity demanded of that very commodity whose price you are changing or whose price is changing. So that is what we are measuring. We want to see the extent of the change. That when we change the price from this level to this level, how will it affect the demand of that very commodity? So the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of that commodity, call it X, as a result of change in the price of that commodity X. That is what we call price elasticity of demand. So after we have calculated that degree, that change, that responsiveness, we are going to find that our calculations are going to land us on something that is conclusive. And how do we conclude that response? So price elasticity of demand is or refers to the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity as a result of change in the price of the commodity. That is the responsiveness, or you can say is the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity as a result of change in the price of that commodity. So price is for the same commodity which is changing in the demand. And we said after calculating the elasticity, we are going to have a conclusive result, which is going to be either the product is elastic, is inelastic, is unitary, perfect, inelastic, or perfectly elastic. These will be our conclusions. Either it is elastic, inelastic, unitary, or perfectly inelastic. That's what we are going to find in our calculations. Once we finish calculating, we are going to see figures, and we are going to look at each one of these, what it is by figures. But elastic means that there is a big change. A slight change in the price leads to a big change in the quantity demanded. Here, you are going to have big change, small change in the price. Small change in the price, leading to big change in quantity demanded. That is elastic. That will be the conclusion from what we shall calculate, how we are going to calculate. With the figure we get to lead us to conclude that the change, the degree of responsiveness is elastic. Once we see that, once we come up and say it is elastic, the implication is there is a small change in the price which is leading to a big change in the quantity demanded of a commodity. If it is inelastic, it is the opposite. That a big change in the price leading to small change in the quantity demanded. A big change in the price. You move your price from, say, 2,000 to 5,000. Very big change. That is more than 100% increase. But the demand does not change as the price has changed. Slight change. You may find that a person who has been buying 10 kilograms of sugar, after increasing it by that percentage, is now buying 9 kilograms or 8 kilograms. That means that there is a small change. So we conclude and say the demand is inelastic. Now, when it is unitary, it means that the change in the price, the percentage change in the price is equal to the percentage change, or the degree of change in the price is equal to the degree in change of quantity demanded. And usually the unitary is 1. When you calculate, the answer will be 1. We shall look at them as we calculate, and we look at these ones as elastic, inelastic, by figures. Then perfectly inelastic. Once we calculate and we get the figure that will show us that it's perfectly inelastic, it will be meaning that the change in the price does not cause any change in quantity demanded. In other words, you have 100% change in the price of a commodity, but there is no any change in the quantity demanded. It means that the change in price will not affect the elasticity. Is perfect, inelastic. It doesn't change. It is like something that is hard. You cannot change it. You cannot stretch it. You cannot stretch that thing. That means it has perfect inelastic demand. And these ones, we shall conclude with this when we have finished calculating and we see the figures. So we are now defining these ones to know that this mean this. But when we come to calculations, we shall put these ones in figures, so that when you calculate, which figure will give you a conclusion that this is elastic, that this is inelastic, that this is unitary, that this is perfect inelastic, or this is perfect elastic. So we shall look at them when we are looking at the figures. But at this level, we want to find out that when I say it is inelastic, what does it mean? Inelastic means that a big change in price will not lead to a big change in the quantity demanded. In other words, the price changes so much, but the demand changes slightly. Once we say elastic, then you know what it is. These ones are to give you a glimpse of the terminologies we use, such that when we mention it, you know what it means. And we shall illustrate it when we come to the figures. Perfect elastic means that once we talk of perfect elastic, it means that a big change it means that without any change in price, there will be a big change in the quantity demanded. So we shall look at the figures, which figures indicate this, and we shall also look at them as well on the diagrams. The diagrams that are showing these terminologies. But what we want to put in our heads is what is meant by elastic. What do we expect, so that you figure it out, that once it is elastic, this is how we are supposed to conclude. This is what it means. This is what it indicates. The elasticity is such and such, this. So that is why we have to define these ones first, so that we put them in our heads. By the time we come to the diagrams, by the time we come to the figures, we shall have known exactly what it implies. So this is the introductory part of elasticity, and which we must understand very well if we are to understand the implications of the price elasticity of demand. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in economics, we give statements. In most cases, we illustrate. The illustrations usually go by diagrams as well as by figures. So we use the mathematical illustrations or explanations, as long as using the diagrammatical explanations. So at this time we have talked of degree. The moment we talk of degree, it brings in some bit of calculation figures. You are talking about some figures. The degree talking about the temperature degree, you are talking about any kind of degree, it means you are talking about figures. There must be a figure somewhere. So a degree of responsiveness of content demanded of a commodity, which is resulting from a change in the price of the commodity. Even this change, because we want to see the change, to measure this change, it actually means that we must have the figures. So there is a formula, or there is a way we calculate the figures. We calculate these changes. So, if we are going to calculate price elasticity of demand, price elasticity, we shall abbreviate it as that. So, if you see DCP, that E and D, double D, it is referring to price elasticity of demand. How do we calculate this price elasticity of demand? This is what we do. We look at the percentage change in the quantity demanded of that commodity X. That X refers to the commodity. This is the percentage change. I said this triangle here represents change, because we are mathematicians. In mathematics, that is change. And we look at the percentage change in the price of X. So this X is very important. It takes us to the definition that we have used, that it refers to the percentage change, or degree of change in the quantity demanded of the commodity, given commodity, which is X, as a result of the percentage change in the price of X. So it is this formula which we have to use. If you expand this formula, how do we calculate the change? In simple mathematics, you see many people, not many, but all students in Ugandan setup, you have to do economics with mathematics. I've mentioned that one before. If you're not doing the principal subject mathematics, you must be doing subsidiary mathematics. So we cannot dwell with the calculations. They are part and parcel of the economics subject. So, but there are those who find it difficult, or some difficulties in calculations. So we can't leave them behind. We move step by step, slowly, but our calculations in economics are very good. You're not going to get the sines and cosines and the tangents and so on. Ours is add, subtract, multiply, or you subtract, you multiply, or you add, or you divide. So those are the four that we are using. So here, percentage change. How do we calculate the percentage change? You get the quantity 2 minus quantity 1 over quantity 1, and you get the percentage. That is times 100. Let us put it as times 100. That is the mathematics. We get the quantity 1 because you are looking at the change. Change moved from Q1, output 1, or product 1, to output 2, over the origin, because you are looking at a percentage change. What was the percentage change? Now, when you look, we get this, we divide all this by the percentage change in the price of the product. So, how do we do that? It is P2 minus P1 over P1 times 100. That is the formula that we have to use to calculate the percentage change, or the degree of responsiveness of our product, that is the elasticity. So what do we do when we come to this situation or this level? We are seeing 100 here, we get rid of it, and we remain with this. And we remain with that. What does it mean? That now we are going to have the change. The next step will be change in quantity over quantity. That's change in output over change change in output over output divided by, we are just simplifying this level. So divided by change in P over P. That's what we have to do. Now you know in mathematics, the moment you have such a situation, what you do is to change the side, this right hand side. So you put it as change in output over output times P over change in P. That's what happens. That's what you have to do. And then this definitely will push you to change in output over change in P times P over 2. That's what we're going to have as our formula. So this one pushes you up to that level. This one will push you up to that level. The moment we started from here, we move to this level, we cancel out, and then we come to this level, and finally we end up at that level. So this is a formula for calculating the price elasticity of demand. That is the formula which we are supposed to use when you calculate the price elasticity of demand. It has to be noted that this change is not supposed to be shown in negative. But we know very well that the demand law, after stating it, and you have the curve, it has a negative slope. So the change that is there is definitely negative. But the change cannot be negative practically. The change, the stretching cannot be negative. Negative would mean that possibly what you are stretching will just break. So it cannot be negative. That means we have to get our figure. Our figure must be positive. So the formula now requires us that after doing this, after calculating, after our calculation, we have to multiply whatever we get by -1. So on your formula, you have to indicate that after getting whatever you get here, definitely it will be negative. Why is it going to be negative? It's going to be negative because the demand curve is downward sloping. And elasticity cannot be negative. Elasticity has to be positive. Because it has to be positive, that means that you have to make this figure, which automatically is negative by calculation. Because it is negative by calculation, because it is negative in calculation, because it is negative in calculation, we have to multiply. We have to multiply -1. That -1 is going to help us. So we are saying that this is the formula to calculate the price elasticity of demand, and this is how we move with this formula. As we are concluding, I said the figure that you get here must be negative, and to avoid this negative, because price elasticity of demand cannot be negative, though the change is going to give you negative, but the elasticity is supposed to be stretching, so increasing cannot be negative. That's why we have to multiply the figure we get by -1. So after that, we have to get some exercise and see how actually it is done, how it happens, how it takes place. So we are going to have some exercise. So we are going to calculate the price elasticity of demand as an example. Just a simple example. We can have some figures here. So we are showing that there is a price here, and there the quantity demanded in kilograms, assuming this quantity is in kilograms. So the first price that we have is 150, and the second one is 200. No, yes, 200, and then the kilograms we have here. At that price, we are buying 700 kilograms of whatever that you may need. And then when the price went up to 200 shillings, the demand went down to 300 kilograms. So using our formula, which we have just seen, how do we calculate the price elasticity of demand? That is a percentage change in quantity demanded as a result of percentage change in the price of the commodity. And this is exactly what demand shows, and that is the demand law. That when the price was 150, the quantity demanded was 700. Then when it went to 200, the quantity demanded reduced to 300. That's what happens. So now we calculate. We go back to our formula, which we have to use. The formula, we say quantity demanded, the percentage change in quantity demanded as a result of percentage change of so we are calculating this price elasticity of demand using our formula. We are going to take it in the simplest way, and we substitute as we look at the figures. So what is the change in quantity demanded? The change is 300 minus the original 700 over 700. That is the 2 minus 2 minus 1 over 1. Then all this we have to divide it by the change here. The change here is 200 minus 150 over 150. That is the figure that we have. We have to divide it as such. Now, from that level, what do? We can start getting the figure here, which we can finally divide by this one here. When you look at the calculations there, if we begin with the quantity quantity demanded. When you calculate this, you will definitely get a 0.57, which is more or less 0.6. And this one, we are going to divide it by this figure here, which is the 50 over 150, and that will give you 0.3. When you divide these figures, remember this is negative. Why is it negative? Because 300 minus 400, it is going to give you, minus 700, it is going to give you negative 400. And once there is a negative on this, the other one is positive, this one is negative. But a negative divided by the positive, you get a negative figure. So this one is negative, and we shall take this one of negative 0.6. So if you divide negative 0.6 by 0.3, you are going to get negative 2. That's what we are going to get. Now, if you get negative 2, we go by our instruction that elasticity cannot be in negative. So since we have got a negative figure and we are presenting elasticity, we have to get negative 2 times 1 to give you 2. So the price elasticity of demand for this table or for this demand is 2. The price elasticity of demand is 2. That means that the change, the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of this commodity by calculating the elasticity is 2. That is the price elasticity of demand that we have got. I said by calculation supposed to be negative 2. Why is it negative 2? Because by demand law, then the curve, the demand curve is a negatively sloping curve. It is downward sloping as we have been seeing it. Therefore, even here the figures, when you look at them, when the price is increasing, the quantity demanded is decreasing. So this one is negative. It has a negative trend. Because you are dividing the negative by the positive, you get a negative figure. But elasticity is presented in a positive figure. That's why you have to multiply it by the figure of, by negative 1 to get a positive figure. So, what do we conclude with this? We have already seen the calculation, we have seen the figures. You can try so many other numbers, but the figures that you are going to get now takes us to the other conclusion which we made. The conclusions which we made, we have seen the figures, it is 2. So now I want to get the summary of the conclusions that you get, whether this is elastic, this is this, and this is what you are going to find, or this is what you get. If you calculate and the figure is greater than 1, if you calculate and the figure is greater than 1, then we say the elasticity is, or this elasticity is having elastic demand. The moment you calculate and the figure is greater than 1, like the one we have just calculated, the answer was 2. 2 is greater than 1. So if you have calculated and the question is asked, what is the nature of elasticity of that for that commodity which you have calculated, and you have calculated the answer is 2, you just put there on that question that the demand is elastic. Why is it elastic? The figure is here. Anything above 1, it is called elastic. Anything that is below 1 is called inelastic. If you calculate and the figure is below 1, You can calculate and you find that the figure you have finally got is 0.8, is 0.4, it is less than 1. Then we say it is inelastic. That's what it implies. And when you calculate and the figure is 1, we say it is having unitary elasticity. The moment it is 1, then it has unitary elasticity. This is to help you when you have calculated, because we are finding out what is the percentage change, what is the degree of change. And we said earlier when we were starting that the conclusion will be either the elasticity is inelastic, the change in demand is inelastic, or it is elastic. Now, if it is greater than 1, elastic demand. If it is less than 1, inelastic demand. If it is 1, it is unitary. And if it is 0, you may calculate and the answer is 0. The moment you calculate and your answer is 0, then you know it is having perfect inelastic demand. It has perfect inelastic demand. Then there is what we call infinite. When the figure is too big, we call it infinite. The mathematicians call it infinite. If it is infinite, then we know that it is perfectly elastic demand. It is perfectly elastic demand. So it is very important to know these calculations with elasticity, price elasticity of demand. We begin by the definition. We have known what the definition is. Then we have known that there are calculations. Then the calculations will give us the conclusions. And the conclusions, we put them in our English. It is inelastic demand. It is perfectly elastic. It is perfectly inelastic. All these are out of the calculations that we have done. The calculations that we have gone through using that formula. That is the formula for calculating price elasticity of demand. And from that formula, we get the figures. And the figures will give us the conclusions. And these conclusions will be directing the economists to take a decision that now if you have a big percentage change in price and there is no big change in the commodity demand, that means it is inelastic. The demand, the change in price is very big, but the change in the quantity demanded is very small. You have to find out what commodities face this, and if you are going to take any government policy, any economic policy towards that commodity, then you have to know what is the implication and how is it to affect the consumers, because this is showing you that once you increase the price so high, there will be slight change in demand. What do I do with such commodity? Those will be the answers that you have to answer. The questions which you have to answer when you are taking any government policy towards that commodity. Now, the next consideration, we are going to put these conclusions into diagrams. How do the diagrams look like when you have calculated this? How do the diagrams look like for these conclusions? These are conclusions after your calculation. You first calculate, find out the figure, name it, and say this change is elastic, this change is inelastic, this change has unitary elasticity, this one perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic. Those are conclusions. Now these conclusions, we have to illustrate them with the diagrams, and that is what we are supposed to move to as our next topic. or subtopic, because we are still under the topic of price theory, and because we are still in price theory, we are looking at subtopics. So our next subtopic will be to look, is going to be to look at the illustration of these conclusions which you have seen, which are originating from the mathematical calculations.